Good evening, everyone. It is January 27th, 2025. Thank you for attending our CPA Presents first one for 2025. My name is Mike Kaselniak. I am the CPA Flight Safety Chair. Tonight's topic is Meet the FAA Safety Team Program Manager for Colorado and Wyoming. Our guest tonight is Mr. Von Hanson. He is a Colorado native who grew up in Fort Collins. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Northern Colorado before enrolling in Ames Community College's Professional Pilot Program. After graduating from the Professional Pilot Program, he worked for the college as a flight instructor. In 2010, he was appointed as the Chief Flight Instructor for the Ames Community College Part 141 program. He held the chief instructor position for 5 years before taking a job with the FAA as an aviation safety inspector. For the past 9 years, he has worked for the Denver FSDO as the General Aviation Operations Aviation Safety Inspector. He started his current position as the FAASTeam Program Manager for Operations in September 2024. If you would like to receive Wings credit for this presentation, please email me at flightsafety@coloradopilots.org. Now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hanson. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you all for letting me speak tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to bring up a little PowerPoint here. Well, as you got in the introduction there, I've been with the FAA for 9 years in a position as an aviation safety inspector and a principal operations inspector for the last 9 years before taking my current position. And so today I was just gonna, talk a little bit about some of the data from this past year and a little bit about the Wings program, and then answer any questions that you all may have, comments or questions. So I'll start by the mission of the FAAST team and really what we're here for. And that is basically safety promotion through outreach and education primarily. We work with different organizations like Colorado Pilots Association and others as well. So anyway, our FAAST team, as we have a lot of volunteer representatives that work for us. We have actually 65 FAAST team representatives. And in this past year, we had over 100 different activities that our representatives did, and we reached over 20,000 different participants through those activities and things like what the Colorado Pilots Association is doing here tonight. So it's exciting to be the manager with such a proactive and great team that we have here in Colorado and Wyoming. I get into, again, a little bit of the review and some of what we saw here in the two states. We'll start by just talking, this is a 5-year national average of accidents. And if you kind of concentrate 23, 24, you can see it's a pretty steady number, a little bit of a decrease in 24, but relatively close. And that's similar to what we saw here in the state. For Colorado and Wyoming, we had 70 total accidents and incidents, 32 accidents, which is almost the exact same number total that we saw the previous year. What we did see, though, was a little bit of a decrease in Colorado and unfortunately an increase in Wyoming. So total number in those accidents was 19 Colorado and 13 in Wyoming. So about a 31% increase from the previous year in Wyoming, and about a 16% decrease in Colorado. And a big takeaway is there's no huge change, if you will, in the history of aviation. We seem to keep doing and seeing the same sort of events that we keep doing as pilots. And so again, Part 91 leads the way, Part 91 General Aviation in the accidents nationally as well as in our states. And so we have one Part 135, so in the air carrier commuter side of the house, and one Part 137, so ag operations. But the rest were all General Aviation Part 91. And this is, again, a continuing trend. I don't think we're seeing any shocking data here, but approach to landing phase, again, being sort of the primary area where we see the issues in our accidents throughout the state. And this past year, 2 of those landing accidents were hot air balloons. One was a glider and one was a helicopter. It was actually due to a bird strike. But the rest were fixed wing. And then the other thing that stands out, and again, that we see historically is our pilot-induced errors. We are the weak link, and hence why we want to keep working on our best practices, standard operating procedures, and things that we can do, safety culture, to improve those things that we're seeing. One of the things that we also do in the FAAST team and that we focus on in our office is flight instruction, kind of the quality of what we see there. And so looking into that, we did see a total of 22 different incidents and accidents with flight instruction involved. So 9 of those were giving dual instruction in the accidents, and 1 was in solo. And looking into that, we noticed that all 3 of our solo events, the incidents and the accidents, were all loss of control in landing. So again, kind of a common phase of flight where we see a lot of our issues. It's also interesting in here, we did see some mechanical issues, about 5 different accident incidents that were related to engine, like valves, broken flap bracket, cotter pins that were missing from bolts in the landing gear, and one accident, one incident where carb heat misuse was the issue. In both cases, the plane's not performing well. They brought the carb heat on like they should, but of course that makes it now perform not as well as it was, bringing that, and they both kind of panicked and pushed the carb heat back in. And then looking at the after accident analysis, there was nothing wrong with the engine or fuel. And so, again, assuming that it was just the carb ice that caused the engine failure. So that's some kind of interesting data there. Pilot deviations, I'd like to talk a little bit about that too. Colorado is a rich airspace, if you will, with our Bravo, Charlie, Delta. We have the 2 Delta airports up in Wyoming as well, or actually 3 with Jackson Hole. And so I brought this here mainly not to show you the months. It's not so much that trend as much as the total. So last year, a total of 185 pilot deviations. And that is that's a big number, but unfortunately pretty consistent with Colorado and Wyoming. And what we see, this is a representation of the towered and controlled airspace in our areas. If you DO1 is actually Denver approach departure control. ZDV on the end there is Denver Center. And it's not surprising again to see that predominantly a lot of our deviations come out of approach and departure. But it's interesting when you see Aspen with number like that. And that trend has come down, but there was a lot of issues with pilots not flying their departure procedures or some of the clearance and approach procedures into um, Aspen that are causing those numbers. And then recognizing that, BJC is also high, and that's a combination at BJC of flight, but also a bit more ground taxi and ground deviations. Talk a little bit about wings. I would imagine the majority of the people on the program tonight are wings members, which is awesome. But just in case somebody isn't, I wouldn't be doing my job if I weren't promoting wings. And so again, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. So for anybody who hasn't created an account at FAASafety.gov, that was where we'd start. And anyone that'd be interested that you may know, keep promoting wings. We appreciate it, but this is also them where you can go in and create your profile and select any of the topics and information that you want to receive, so that we can keep you informed and you can participate in the events that matter to you. And then attend the seminars like you are tonight, get the ground credits. And then be sure to also go after those flight credits. I think we tend to see more people that do a great job, a lot of ground activity. But remember, you always can keep relief from a flight review by completing a phase of wings, which is 3 ground and 3 flight activities. And it's, go online and register for any of the 3 different flight activities. Go out with your flight instructor, and you can submit that through wings. Your flight instructor is able to then go in and give you credit for that, and it's tracked in the database. So that way you would now qualify for relief within a flight review. And really the big thing about the wings program, those of you that utilize it, hopefully you can support this and talk about that as well with your fellow pilots. But the FAA is really looking for proficiency, not just currency. And this seems to be a great avenue, not only just to get the relief within a flight review, but to be more active than meeting with a flight instructor once every 24 months and doing a flight review. So keep them confident, capable and safe. So again, proficiency and peace of mind. Flying regularly with a flight instructor, you get that quality of the critical eye. Sometimes we have friends that can fly with us, but they may not be as in tune or as willing to share critique and things that we may be bad habits we've picked up. So again, perfect practice can help us to try to be that perfect pilot. And then again, you get it documented in wings, it's tracked, and you can, again, keep your proficiency and also a flight review. So there's kind of a quick breakdown for you all on kind of some general trends in the wings program. I'd love to open it up to see if I can answer any questions that we have in the group.
So we had a couple questions come in during the presentation. Let's go back up here real quick. Could you define the difference between an incident and an accident?
Yeah, so if in NTSB 830, they define an accident. And then incident is really anything that's not an accident in the definition of that. And then there's certain things defined in there too that basically wouldn't require reporting. And so when we get a notification, everything is defined as an occurrence. And if it's got, substantial damage, then we move into definitions or potential definitions of an accident. If we don't have that, it's defined as an incident. And we document that in the same manner, same form, but the separation of severity.
Okay. Another question we had, I think this was on slide 13 or more related to it. Are the deviations that you had, are they all deviations or just general aviation?
No, good question. Those are all just general aviation. The 121, part 121, so your air carriers, your United and Continental, the big airlines, um, we don't track those. That's done directly within the parts of the FAA that manage those airlines, that have oversight of the airlines themselves. So these are just general aviation numbers. However, in those numbers, we can pull from the Part 135, which is your air carriers that do on-demand and very limited scheduled service in some cases. So it is really GA numbers for showing you.
Okay. Regarding safety concerns, what's your biggest concern for Colorado and Wyoming flight safety wise? Probably pretty broad, but
yeah, we try to track the trends just to see if there's any big change. And as I was kind of alluding to in the presentation, that it seems like we keep doing the same, kind of having the same problem areas with the accidents and the incidents. And so trying to concentrate on that, promote again through the education of new students, but also pilots. Again, the human factors being the big piece. We see a lot of issues where pilots, it's going to sound funny, but the 5 hazardous attitudes, if many of you remember that coming up in your private training or whatever, or you've referenced it recently in the FAA handbooks, those are prevalent, and the only way you can combat those is to recognize them. And so we see it a lot with impulsivity, pilots just getting in a hurry, or complacency, or overconfidence sometimes in their abilities or something they've done a lot. But also, lack of education, not taking the time to learn their avionics, and jumping out, into the airspace and thinking that, they'll learn it on their own there. So things like that. So really, I honestly, from my experience, those hazardous attitudes show up all the time. And the only way to combat it is if you're willing to remember those so you can recognize those when you're doing it.
let's see. Do you have any comments or suggestions on improving the pilot deviation and safety at the Fort Collins Loveland Airport, given the current tower situation?
It's an interesting question. Looking at the deviations out of that airport, there isn't really a pattern. They're kind of all over. We see a lot of pilots just replying correctly to a clearance and not doing what they were cleared for. We've had, a couple where they just didn't establish two-way radio communication. But so, yeah, I don't actually see any abnormal or consistent deviation at that airport that we're not seeing commonly at other airports. No systemic one issue, if you will.
Mike, did you have questions? I've got some, but I'll let you go.
All right, Vaughn. Can you tell us, are there any new technologies or systems being rolled out by the FAA that could impact general aviation operations in the future?
So I don't have a big background in the advanced air mobility, but out of new technologies and just things that I see going on, I would have to say that's probably going to have the biggest impact. And that, the advanced air mobility is working in the area with a lot of these vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that are trying to get certification. Joby is probably the one of the more prolific and farthest along we hear about, that some of you may have heard about or recognize. And it just seems like there's a lot of movement, things happening very quickly. And so I would say, looking forward in maybe a 10-year span, if there's any one technology I think we're going to see have a big impact, would probably be in that arena. But I am by no means an expert or in that. I don't really know a lot about it. And just that's where I would say I think we're going to see it.
Okay. Now, are there, if you know, what are some of the most recent regulatory changes or updates that pilots should be aware of?
So a good question. We've had a little bit of a change to the basic med that will affect a lot of pilots. They've expanded the type of aircraft, so you can now have aircraft that have up to 7 occupants and 6 passengers, and I think up to a maximum takeoff weight of 12,500 pounds. So you still can't fly at over 18,000 feet. So, there's some bigger, more capable airplanes, but there's still going to be some limitations. I think there's a same limitation on max speed, and I think you can do over indicated 250. But they made some changes there. The other one that I think is probably affects a lot of us out there would be the flight instructor, moving from an expiration to a recency of experience. It's not really any different what we have to do, what CFIs have to do in order to keep actively instructing. The same type of activities that we would have to do to renew, we still have to do within a 24-month period and submit an application to the FAA for the recency of experience to keep that going. And another change that happened in the reg kind of related to that is it used to be, and when the CFI expired, I mean, literally the next day, you no longer had a CFI certificate that you could use. You'd have to do a full practical test to get it reinstated. And they did add some relief to, I think it's 61,199, the reinstatement of a CFI reg. So there's now a 3-month relief period that if you don't meet that recency of experience, that pilots can, or instructors can complete a FERC and get their CFI reinstated in that time period. And so that's kind of new.
Okay.
I got a quick question on that topic before we move on, if I could, please.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Vaughn, I just noticed that your CFI renewed this month with an expiration date. And we are into this new, I guess, path of no more reissuance of plastic cards with new expiration dates on it. And we're just doing this, we're calling it recency of experience. So why does it say expiration date?
Well, so I renewed mine before, because that just went into effect, I think, December 1st.
Right.
So I did my renewal before that new rule went into effect. So I still have an expiration, and many of you will. Anyone who, current CFI is still operating under the last renewal prior to December 1st. What'll happen is when you go to renew that one with the expiration certificate or expiration date, on it, you'll do it through recency experience, and the certificate you get on that will not have an expiration on it. So you're going to see that. We're kind of in that limbo period for the next 24 months of people like me who still have an expiration on their CFI until I do the recency of experience. It's going to be hard for me to get used to saying that recency of experience. I've been doing their expiration or renewal for so long. But yeah. Does that answer your question?
Well, does that mean that we still do, those of us who are not actively teaching, still do a flight instructor refresher course,
Yeah.
take the graduation certificate with an 8710 form and mail it into Oak City, or do we still visit the FSDO or what?
Any of the above. It is, so even though we can't call it renewal, it is the exact same process. You have the same options that you had before, whether that's a FERC or, if you were doing enough activity with the pass rate, or if you qualified through wings, or if you had certain duties and responsibilities. All of those still work for recency of experience, and you still have to fill out an 8710, submit it to airman certification, and that still has to be signed off by either a DPE that has that authorization, or an aviation safety inspector, or what we would call an airman certification representative through a lot of the FERCs. A lot of your professional FERCs have ACRs that can do that renewal for you. So you're going to really do all the same things as a CFI that you've been doing to renew. It's just now going to be a recency of experience instead of a renewal.
The one issue I have with this whole change is that how will there be a receipt in exchange for presenting these documents? In other words, I would go to the FSDO with my 8710, my grad certificate, and walk out with a temporary. So, if it takes Oklahoma City 8 weeks to cut a new plastic card, who cares? I still have this temporary in my hand. Am I going to be issued some sort of paper confirmation that I have complied with what's required of me when I come to see you with these documents in hand, or are you just going to take them from me and send them on?
That's a good question. I actually think it might be an endorsement statement that you submitted, but really, I'll have to look into that. I don't know if that's correct. It will, and we still have that same relief of the 3 months prior on that 24 months experience, so that you want to take advantage of that, so that you don't find yourself with IACRA popping up if you are an endorsing instructor, and IACRA saying, this instructor no longer is eligible, and doesn't meet that recency requirement. So yeah, that's a good question, because you're right. You're not going to walk away with a temporary certificate. So
The problem becomes when the paperwork gets lost in the shuffle. I've been a CFI for 34 years, and this has happened to me twice,
oh my gosh,
where Oklahoma City, my temporary, which was good for like 120 days, is about to expire. I'm on the phone with Oak City saying, "What's going on?" And they say, "Who are you?" We shall be expired. So now I'm chasing down the ops inspector who signed the temporary to say, let's double back. And that's the only proof that I have that I did what was required of me in a timely manner.
yeah. Well,
So
what I
that's
might suggest at this point, without knowing if there is a paper type receipt, if you will, that we're going to be able to walk away with, is I always, as an inspector, would make a duplicate copy of what we did on IACRA through that submission, and have that printed. So if we had to reconstruct the file, we had what we would need to do, and I would give that to you. I would give that to the applicant to hold on to, so that we could then reproduce that for airman certification. And thinking about the old way of doing it, for example, if you did it through the mail, one of the things that the FAA policy said was that you would keep a copy of that application that you had sent, and you would literally show that, because you didn't have a temporary since you mailed it to an inspector, if they were to do a ramp or something like that, to show, here's when I submitted it, it's in process.
all right. So it sounds like when I come to see you, you're going to log into IACRA to complete the process. Then we should print off the pages from your screen that show that you have completed the process, because 4 months from now you might not even remember me. So again, that gives me something to walk out of the office with in hand to prove that I did what was required of me.
Yeah. Yeah, and IACRA, it's a digital process, but I have heard of individuals even through IACRA where for some reason it never process that, through it's rare, much more rare than when we were doing it back in paper, like the old days. But yeah, going back in Niagara, you should also be able to pull up and show the application that you had submitted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for the question, Bob. So one of the other questions is, given the rapid movement from CFI to airline pilot, you're seeing any sort of trends with the CFI proficiency?
Good question. Yeah, so we've actually seen a decline in the pass rate. The first time pass rate on practical tests is down nationally. So, trying to put our finger on exactly the cause of that. I think a lot of us have belief or ideas that we're had this influx of additional flight training that's going on while hiring was strong and the pilot demand is there. We need pilots. And so a lot of people are trying to push through as fast as they can, right, to get to that airline job. And so, general consensus is that quality is maybe suffering a bit on that. People aren't putting in or getting as much time as they need. So I can't say for certain that that's the cause. I don't have data that would say, yeah, that's it. But we've seen that trend, and it seems to kind of follow suit with the increase in demands for pilot training. So I personally think that, yeah, we're seeing that, but we're also seeing airlines hiring at standards that they didn't used to have to, right? When there was a stack of pilots and applications for them to go through, it used to be, they'd do anything they could to figure out how to weed that down to the top selection. And, they couldn't be as selective. So, there's also some hiring, some pilots that are coming in with less time than you could have even met them in to apply for in the past.
So with how is that something that the FAST program would be able to help, maybe from the students, or
Yeah,
just to keep it within the spirit of the conversation, the call?
I'd like to think so. Like I said, we're tracking. One of the things we do is track CFI performance. So we are looking at CFI's pass rates, and trying to find CFIs who are endorsing students that aren't doing well, seem like they're not passing on their first attempts, and trying to identify places where we can come in and educate and provide additional resources, trying to help bring those CFIs and their students the knowledge that they need and the ability to be more successful. So yes, that is something that we work with and as the FAST team.
Okay. Mike, back to you.
All righty, where was I? Okay, I wrote some things down here. This is one of the things that really got me wound up a couple months back. Congested versus non-congested. I attended one of the noise abatement meetings at Centennial Airport, and there was a lot of discussion about what constituted congested versus non-congested. Could you touch on that a little bit, Vaughn?
That is a great question, and one I'm really glad you asked, actually. So you will not find a definition by the FAA of a congested area, and that's intentional. The FAA looks at incidents, deviations, complaints, whatever may generate our investigation on a case-by-case basis. And it's interesting to note, if you look at some of the cases that have been ruled on by NTSB judge, or you'll find that it varies from a scenario where they may have found as few as, I think, 3 structures be congested, and then another scenario where there was many more structures, but they didn't find it congested. And it kind of comes down to population or people, that could be affected. And I give an example to people of a lake. If we look at 91-119, we see it refers to other than congested or less than congested and bodies of water where we can get lower. So you fly over a lake, let's say early in the morning, and nobody's on it. Well, that's going to be uncongested. However, later that day you come back and now there's all kinds of boats and people out on that lake utilizing it. Now, that same altitude may be absolutely in deviation of that regulation. So what I tell pilots is, terrain is constantly changing as we fly. We've got our sectional charts, our ForeFlights, and different products to help us, and a lot more advanced avionics in some cases available to us to kind of help keep sense of what our height above the ground is. But give yourself a cushion. Don't be flying along right at 1,000 feet. Pay attention to what that 2,000 feet horizontally or in any direction from you as well. And there's advantages from a safety standpoint of keeping our altitude as well. That's energy. If something were to come along, something were to happen, it gives us time to deal with it. So yeah, that's what you got to keep in mind is, and there's still, this surprises me, but it's still out there where some people believe that the yellow portions of the sectional chart are the only areas that are considered congested. And I don't know what that came from. Those are clearly going to be areas that we will consider congested. I don't think there would be any question about that. But that does not mean that the areas outside of that are or wouldn't be considered congested.
Well, I have to admit, I had to look that up because in my pilot training, I was never told what the yellow was, and I always figured it was congested. And then doing some research, I found out basically it's the area at night that you would see with lights. And that really, I was like blown away when I read that. I was like, what? No one ever explained that to me in all my years of flying and training. So I was really surprised to see that. As far as enforcement action versus the compliance program, when would you enforce something, or when would you do the 5 types of compliance?
Well, first off, I want to tell the group that as the FAASTeam Program Manager, I do not do enforcements. So you come, if you have questions, have concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a safe individual to talk to. But the compliance program, this is a good question. It came out right as I was coming into the FAA. I think technically maybe 10 years ago. And so it's still not well known. And so again, I put this out to the group and I would ask everybody on tonight's presentation to help spread this word about the compliance program to your fellow pilots. And the way it works is by policy, FAA policy, we must try to utilize the compliance program anytime we're dealing with a deviation. There's 3 things that can prevent us from being able to use the compliance program. And that is whether the deviation was intentional, illegal, or they have a history of doing it, meaning, okay, we've tried to fix this through the compliance program in the past and it's just not working. It keeps happening. So unless you fall into that category, that's where we're going to go. We're going to utilize the compliance program. And the compliance program is, kind of taken from, a lot of people know of, or what's commonly referred to as like a NASA report, but basically voluntary disclosure, where we've learned that instead of just having enforcement as our only tool to bring pilots back into compliance, it's better to give them safety and say, hey, let's learn from your mistakes. We're all human. We all make mistakes. So tell us about it and let's see what we can do to improve safety. And I personally think it's worked extremely well. I think this program has been a benefit. And so don't freak out. When the FAA calls, don't, think you just got to go grab an attorney. I would encourage you to talk to the FAA and explain the scenario. But what they are going to want to do if you find yourself in one of these scenarios, is we're all ultimately going to want to know, well, why did it happen? What was the root cause, is what we call it. You want to dig down and understand why it happened. Because if we understand that, now we can come up with, well, what could be done differently to prevent that in the future, which is what we're all after, right? And if you use the compliance program, it's not an enforcement. It doesn't show up on your record. It will live forever with the FAA in an FAA database. But on the pilot records database, for example, if an airline or whatever were pulling your record, they are not going to see something that was handled with the compliance program. They will see enforcements, they will see accidents, but so that's the advantage to the compliance program is it's protects you kind of in that regard, and we hopefully all can then benefit from what we learn from it.
Okay. It looks like I missed a question previous. One of our people online asked, is there any consideration for allowing basic med above 18,000 feet when ATC requests you to climb to accommodate?
Not that I'm aware of. I might stop sharing my screen if that's okay. I think you guys are all just seeing the big questions.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I don't know if that's any better or not, but
Nope, totally works.
okay. If it's an emergency, we've got to remember that puts the rule book out the window. We need to do whatever we need to do to deal with that situation safely. So yeah, if you got ATC wanting you to climb, but you're on basic med, you should tell them you're unable. And again, something to think about. If you're flying up at those altitudes, if you have an aircraft that's coming up there, maybe basic med isn't the best choice. Stick with your third class medical and prevent the possibility of you being limited from that.
Okay. Another one is, what's the FAA perspective on the integration of drones into controlled airspace?
Well, that is already happening. One thing I will tell you that we should all be aware of is that, the FAA used to post NOTAMs for drones that were being operated less than 400 feet, if it was just going to be a general operation. And you may have noticed that you're not seeing those NOTAMs anymore, and that is true. Any flight, 400 feet and below is going to be drones. So we need to all get used to, if we're flying below that altitude, the possibility of drones. Now, it doesn't relieve them of their responsibilities of staying out of the way of other aircraft, but we certainly know there have been close calls and near misses and incidents. But there are also, waivers that have been granted on aircraft more than 55 pounds. They're currently being utilized. There's some other states that are actually doing deliveries. I think, Amazon and Walmart, maybe some other, big names like that are actually using these devices to make deliveries in certain states and kind of a trial basis. So it's already happening, and it's gonna. That's the population of aviation that's growing the most, the fastest. So yeah, we're going to see more of that.
Okay. I don't know if we addressed this one or not. Does the FAA safety team review the ASRS reports from the region regularly? If so, are there any clear trends or takeaways that drive the self-reported incidents?
So the ASRS, if people aren't familiar, that's an aviation safety and reporting system. And that's the concept really that we took the compliance program from is, hey, tell us what you did and we won't penalize you for it, for being proactive and trying to improve safety. I'm not aware of where the FAASTeam is pulling that data from those type of programs. Those, live within 135 operations, 121 operations, and then for example, if you filled out one of those reports, which again, it can be commonly referred to as a NASA report, we don't get access to that. An aviation safety inspector doing an investigation, that is, again, data that goes and is utilized, and the protection it gives a pilot is if you did find yourself in an action being taken, so an enforcement action, not compliance program, actually resolving or being the result of what happened. It doesn't, and this, I didn't know this till I got to the FAA. I thought they kind of observed you from any inaction. Those actions actually still take place. It goes through the system, and that enforcement actually goes all the way through. The difference is whatever we determined, whether it was going to be, a suspension of your license or a sanction, that doesn't happen. We'll tell you, hey, if it hadn't been for that report, we would take your license for the next 30 days or 60 days or whatever it would have been. And that just won't end up happening. But the whole enforcement process still runs its course and determines what outcome would have been issued. So
Okay.
they're still good to fill out. I would encourage people to still fill those out, and we get useful data from it.
Okay.
But again, in safety inspector, we can't access that. We don't get access. That's protected. You could provide it to us, but we can't access it.
Okay. What feedback would you like to hear from pilots?
Well, as far as feedback, any kind of thoughts that you have, concerns in the local environment, areas that you think where, again, if you think about our mission, the FAASTeam, through education and promotion of safety topics, that we can make improvements. That's where I would love to hear from different individuals, because that is our mission, and what we would want to be doing. So anyone who has ideas or thoughts on that, I would ask them to reach out and let us know.
Okay. Don't mean to hog the whole thing, but as part of your responsibilities, do you travel to the airports and the flight schools and do seminars and stuff like that?
Yeah, we do. And I work with the runway safety team. There's a national team, and we look into that as well. So sometimes we're meeting with people at the airports, air traffic control, or airport authorities to discuss those issues. I'm still so new in the position. I've only been to a couple of those meetings. We've got several scheduled throughout the year. So we'll kind of see, and I'll learn more as we go through that. But yeah, we do. And obviously we've got a big area, Colorado and Wyoming, to cover. And so do our best to try to get out to all the different areas, including the rural areas, just to see what may be going on, and talk to pilots and instructors in those areas as well, and just keep them educated on the FAASTeam and the different resources and kind of what's happening in their areas. So yeah, there's quite a bit of travel.
Okay, great. All right. Anyone else out there have any questions for Vaughn? I've run out of questions.
I've got a few. What sort of outreach do you do to the flight schools, or are you dependent upon the CFIs to let the students or get the students to be aware of the FAST program?
Well, we have presentations directly related to the FAST program to help educate them on how to register, what they can do. Kind of not as brief as what I did tonight, a little bit more in depth, to take them through the whole process, and our safety reps do that as well.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't realize you were pausing.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. We promote the safety that way. There was more to your question though, and I apologize. It kind of started to seem like I feel like I'm
No,
not.
that's fine. I got another one coming in right behind it. So I think you spoke a little bit about this as far as having wings credit if there's an enforcement action or something along those ways. Is there like
Yeah,
a
I
way?
didn't. I think
Okay.
what I talked about with the compliance program and how, that isn't an enforcement. But one of the things that is beneficial to the wings program as well is when we do an accident or an incident investigation, literally on the form that the FAA investigator has to fill out related to that accident or incident, is a section that wants to know what kind of recent training and education activities, specifically one directly wings, and what their most recent and their activity there is. So we actually look at that to determine, are you active? Are you trying to do continuing educational things to improve your flying and safety? So there is a benefit, and I don't know if it's still the case, but one of the insurance companies out there I know used to also um, give a discount to a lot of their aircraft owners if they participated in wings, and so it proves itself there too.
I can speak from personal experience that it is a question that gets asked when there's an incident. Um, and then you answered my question because insurance one was coming up right behind that. That if they had some levels of discounts or encouraged that as part of the insurance engagement.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I might tell the group, and this is just my personal observation, but we saw in the data that I went through that 91 general aviation operations are still the big culprit. And when we look at that, I think there was roughly 31,000 activities for operations at towered airports this past year. And there were about 24,000, I think it was, operations that would have fallen into the Part 135 sort of air carrier on-demand operations. So even though there's a lot of 135 operations going on, there's a huge difference when you look at those numbers of general aviation pilots that are still bulk of our accidents and incidents. And if you look at what we do, the regulations, the demands that we put on 135 pilots, well, they must do, if they're a captain, they're having to do a proficiency check every 6 months. Every first officer is doing their competency check every 12 months. And so routine checking. And, that's really the mindset behind our wings program too, is, again, not waiting, but making that a routine part of your pilot lifestyle, and is to get in front of someone who has the ability to critique, like an examiner in these cases. And you can see that if we take sort of the structure of an airline and incorporate that into our private general aviation pilot lives, there's a lot that can be learned and that we can use to improve our safety. But that is expensive. Aviation is incredibly expensive, and it takes time. You got to find that instructor or to sit there and schedule the time and make that happen. You know, anyway, that's just an observation, and I think something that I would recommend to model yourself, to look at and to try to model within your personal life as a pilot.
Sure. We got a question from the room. Can you remind the group on how to use the compliance program? Is there an online link or anything like that?
Well, I'm so glad somebody asked this question, because you will only be using the compliance program if you made a mistake that the FAA is investigating you for. So
Let me rattle it off for you because I got it at the top of my head because I use it all the time.
yeah, so it's really an awareness that if you had a pilot deviation, if you have an accident, if you have an incident, um, it used to be historically before we had the compliance program and enforcement was the only tool the FAA could use. The general rule is go to your lawyer, and have them talk to the FAA. That is not the case anymore, and again, unless what you did was illegal, you did it intentionally, or you're just historically keep doing this over and over again, there's no reason not to work with. We want to figure out why it happened. We want to figure out how to improve safety. So you're not going to be looking for or reaching out for the compliance program. You just want an awareness of that, what it is, and make pilots aware that if they come to you and say, "Oh man, I screwed up. ATC told me, hey, copy this number down. Possible pilot deviation." Don't panic. Just think it through. Try to think why it happened. Determine what you think is the root cause, and just get ready for us to reach out to you and work with us.
Is this the one that's commonly referred to as the NASA report?
Well, NASA report's totally different. You
Okay.
can fill that out in addition. And that's maybe where the confusion also came when I was talking about, we used the voluntary disclosure as sort of the concept of creating the compliance program. It's what it really came from. But the NASA or the ASAP program, that is its own thing. And it's not ours, if you will. The ops inspectors within a flight standards district office, again, we can't pull up what you wrote related to that incident or accident. You might tell us that, hey, I filled one of those out. We hear it all the time. And you're welcome to provide us what you wrote or you submit it if you want. But that's not something, again, that we can pull up. It's still a great idea. It's a great way to think through while it's fresh and document everything and submit it, there. But they are two completely different programs.
The link has been provided in the chat for those of you that are, actually, it's not a link directly to it, but it's to a presentation that discusses the compliance program. So if you have questions on that, you can check the link out. Trying to think if I got any other questions. I honestly didn't know that there was a flight section of the Wings program. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so there's kind of three phases. They've got one where your landings, takeoffs, go arounds, another section where you would go up and practice stalls and steep turns and instrument, and another one related to the airport operations. And these are things that we have to do on every practical test. We should be doing on every flight review. But we don't want to wait. And that's kind of where I was coming back to, if we think about the airline world, we would never let these professionals that we're putting our lives in their hands as paying customers, wait 24 hours before we checked or that they had to, practice these skills. And that's really the concept that I as a pilot and try to promote to other pilots is, let's find opportunities. Let's make opportunities where we're getting with a CFI, someone who has the knowledge and the skill and the ability to watch what we're doing and find our bad habits, but to go practice the things that we don't necessarily want to do, like if we're multi-engine pilots doing a VMC demo and doing the stalls and the steep turns and the recoveries, getting under the hood, doing a single engine approach. We want that muscle memory so that if, God forbid, the real thing happens, we do the right things, right? And if we don't have that recency and that proficiency, it's likely we're not going to do what we want. It's not giving us as good a chance.
So is that flying credit something that you need an instructor with you to be able to do the entry into the wings?
Yeah, you're going to need someone, instructor that can attest that you did it. And the best way to do it is, it's super easy for an instructor to get registered at FAASafety.gov as well, and be able to then just give the credit for those flights. So you go up and, when it's done, you would submit that through your account, your Wings account to that instructor. They get that notification that you've asked for validation of that activity, and they just simply go in and validate it. pretty
Okay.
easy.
But the ground stuff is all self-study.
Well, yeah. So, tonight, for example, you'll be able to get wings credit, and that'll be a ground credit. There's so many activities. I mean, if depending on how much you want in your profile, what you clicked as far as interests, um, some of you are probably getting, multiple things every day from the FAST team nationally of that you can participate in and would offer credit. So the ground credit is really easy. It's well known. It's where most people spend their time. But yeah, don't forget about the flight side. It's a great tool.
Now, if I remember correctly, there's like tiers to the wings credit. So like if you do 10 classes or 10 sessions and you advance up through the wings credit criteria, I guess, you get like a
Yeah.
free t-shirt from the FAA or something like that.
I have to admit, I am in need of better understanding of the advanced phases. It used to be
Okay.
bronze and silver and gold maybe. And you could advance through basic to advanced. There have been some changes, and I'm actually kind of need to make sure I understand the current uh, operation of that. And some of our safety reps would be more versed and could answer that question better than I can at this point. I have got to be able to spend some more time with that. Good question, and it's one that I need to definitely research myself.
Okay. Yeah, because I was aware that was there. I knew some early, a number of years ago. I knew some pilots that were always, they'd come into the FBO and be like, "Oh, I advanced to the next level on my wings credit," and I'd be like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah. I've heard there's some changes and again, before I don't want to say something that isn't actually
Sure.
the case anymore. So I kind of need to dig deeper into that to make sure I understand exactly what the FAST team can offer and the various phases.
Bruce Ray made a comment that I think is really important to make sure everybody knows about. NAFI, the National Association for Flight Instructors, and SAFE. I'd have to look what the acronym is on that one, but and other organizations, CPA, have excellent webinars that can be viewed and offer corresponding wings credit. And for those of you, I'm a NAFI member, and it's only I have they're not paying me to say this, but it's probably one of the most beneficial organizations to join because for the cost to join, I think it's like $40 or something like that. There's a fairly substantial discount on ForeFlight as a NAFI member. The membership pays for itself almost twice over with the ForeFlight discount. So, and you don't have to be a flight instructor for it. You could be, I don't even know if you need to be a pilot to be a member, but there are some very good discounts. Nobody offers the level of discounts that the NAFI does, and that's NAFI or National Association of Flight Instructors. So, just a little plug for them. I have other than being a member, I have nothing to do with them. So. Yes, and there is a wings webinar every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock Central. I get those. It's the Saturday morning coffee wings, so very easy to gather the credit.
Mm-hmm. Vaughn, this is Mike. I'm curious about one thing. On one of your graphics that you brought up about the accidents and incidents, on the left-hand column, it was parachute. Was that a powered parachute?
No, so they actually don't fall into unless we don't investigate unless it's fatal. And even then, yeah, parachutes are kind of unique. So really what that means is that we had a fatal parachute accident in the area.
Okay. All right. Just thank you.
And SAFE stands for the Society of Aviation and Flight Educators. I knew that would come up somewhere. Somebody do the work for me.
Yeah.
All right. We've still got 46 people in the room. Does anybody else have any questions? If you would like to ask it directly, you're more than welcome to unmute and put Vaughn on the hot seat. It seems like he's up for it. Wow. So Vaughn, you answered everybody's questions.
I got one. I just took a
Oh,
minute.
okay.
Vaughn, are we gonna have an IA in-person meeting in March?
Yeah, so the office is working on. Are you talking about a FAST meeting or the renewal?
I don't know. I got an email that said that they were gonna try to get something going in March, and I just
Yeah,
wasn't sure if that was going to be a webinar or if it's going to
no,
be
it's going to be an in-person. The office is working on a big IA renewal in-person event that's going to be at the Federal Center, a big auditorium that's there. And I don't remember the exact date, but it's in March, and
Okay,
that's what's going on. Yeah.
it's going to be to be announced in I'll stay tuned. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
All right.
Well, if nobody else has any questions, I do want to say to the group, and I realize not everybody's here, but those of you that attend these things are typically not the pilots that we're trying to reach out to. You're the more active ones. You're the ones taking the initiative to educate yourself and continue that education. So again, I would just encourage you all to pay attention to those around you, and through your example, hopefully mention the Wings program and inspire others to try and get more active in being proactive with their continuing education. I also want to really thank the Colorado Pilots Association. You guys are one of the more prolific organizations in our state. You do really great things. And I'm super appreciative of having you and your participants and your members. You do a great job. And I just want to say thank you to you all.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for attending tonight's presentation. Really appreciate it. We are definitely going to have one next month that's in the works right now. Vaughn, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to do a presentation and introduce yourself to all the aviators out here in your new position. And we wish you the best of luck. And hopefully I get to work with you on some of the FAASTeam events. Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you. Good night.